Hope you are well, and thank you for joining us for this lecture. I'll be honest, I put off this lecture for a very long time before I decided to give it, simply because it is delicate, it's hard, it's real, and what's my qualification? On the other hand, we have to talk about it. I know the parameters of what I can talk and what I cannot talk. And what I hope to do with you for the next hour, and I hope you could stay with us through the time, is to explore various different perspectives on mental health, mental illness, and the role it plays in our life. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen. If you could hear me clearly, please let me know in the comments. Let's begin. Judaism and mental health, the honest truth. Really, the question that we're going to start off with is, who are you? What are you? What defines you? And what do the struggles of mental health tell us about ourselves? Now, I was thinking originally to start off the shir with a joke. But whatever, after sitting and preparing this shir and putting it into PowerPoint, it just felt inappropriate. So forgive me for the more somber attitude. Although I do think it's an inspirational talk, I am starting off this with a humility and a somberness. So let's talk about the parameters of what we're going to talk about tonight and what we won't talk about. I'm not going to be talking about Down syndrome and other such illnesses, not because it's not important, but it's because it's just not within parameters. And I'll be honest, I don't know much about it. What I want to talk about is illnesses that people who live amongst us, who all 43 families who are joining here today, either someone that's watching or someone you know struggles with it and nevertheless lives a functional life, lives a normal life, and yet struggles with various layers of mental illness and mental health. And that's really what I want to address. I want to address the three: your choices, your therapist, and your meds. In other words, in going down in order. There's many of us who our mental health is a bit struggling. I'd imagine 99% of humanity in COVID is not optimal mental health. But for many people, all they need to do is realign themselves with good perspectives, choose to have a positive attitude, think good will be good, go to a few motivational talks, and they'll walk out fine. But then there are others who need a therapist. And that means that they can't just do it by themselves. They need help from somebody. And they reach out to a therapist, and if they find the right therapist who's the right messenger, they're healed. And then there are people who don't only need to make better choices and need a therapist, they need medication as well. And each and every person who's struggling with mental health, as we'll talk about throughout the shir, has to be absolutely honest with themselves which of the three categories. Because I'd imagine that every single person that's here tonight is, at this time of COVID and in different times of their life and crises, at times struggling with mental health. For some, the solution is easy. For others, the solution is hard. But the solution is there. So tonight I'm going to talk to you about the Jewish perspective on mental illness. This is the only text I'm going to read inside, but I thought that it's a beautiful, powerful text that comes directly from the Tanya, which is considered one of the master books of Jewish mysticism, chapter 26. And only today, when I was preparing for the shir, did one of the words that he says in this section really hit me. So I'm going to learn it with you for a few minutes. Biram. But this must be made known as a cardinal principle. Just like the victory, to win something physical. Just as it is with the victory over a physical opponent, for instance, two people who wrestle with each other, each striving to fell the other, to put the other person down, literally two people fighting. If one of them is lazy and sluggish, he will be easily defeated and will fall. Even if he or she is stronger than the other, since the laziness and sluggishness prevent them from revealing their strength. That's the example. And this is how he makes it into real life. Similarly, or the better translation would be exactly like that. That's what kacha mamash means. Exactly like that is with the conquest of one's temptation, one's evil nature. Despite the fact that the good nature in each and every one of us is stronger than the evil. As we explained in previous chapters of Tanya, that a little light of holiness could remove a lot of darkness. Yet here too, the previous rule applies. The rule of if you're lazy and heavy, you can't win. Efshar, those were the two words that I never noticed before. It is impossible to conquer your evil nature, with laziness and sluggishness, which stem from sadness, depression, and a stone-like dullness of the heart. But rather, with alacrity, with excitement, that comes from joy and opening the heart and a heart that is unblemished by any trace of worry and sadness in the world. Now, the Tanya simply, or at least at one level of understanding, is talking about any person. As we said, there's three levels. Some people just need to get out of the sadness by changing their perspective, and those people can and have to change their attitude. But those words, he says, it's impossible to overcome your weaknesses if you're heavy, if you're depressed. In other words, how much more so if your depression is not just because you don't have the right ideas in your head, but if it's clinical, if it's biological, if for some reason your mind does not release certain things to the heart, and that's really what medicines often do, the ability to see things correctly. If without therapy you're unable to see things correctly, you cannot win the battles of life. Early this week, I saw a speech the Lubavitcher Rabbi gave in 1988, where he says, just like if your nose is bleeding for more than 3 days, you're not going to say, okay, that's my new personality, but rather you're going to go to the doctor to get medication. He says, if you're depressed day in and day out, go to the doctor, get the medication, and then get back to yourself. In other words, what he says is just do it and move on. Don't start saying, well, this is who I am, I'm heavy. No, none of us by nature should be heavy. Some of us are nicer, some of us are more serious, some of us are more lighter. But if you're heavy, that literally fighting the battles of life are overwhelming, you're not in the field, you're not fighting. You're not even on the battle. You're on the floor before the fight starts. And that's really what I want. If there's one point that I want to bring across tonight about the Jewish perspective about mental illness is, mental illness is what removes for many of us our true free choice. And until we don't target and deal with the illness, whatever way, method is necessary, we are not giving ourselves or the person that is struggling a fair chance at overcoming the challenges of life. Only with mental health do we get to battle life's challenges with a fair chance. Because it's not as if suddenly a person takes medication or goes to therapy or starts exercising, again, to each their own, as long as they're honest. It's not as if life becomes easy, but it becomes bearable. You're in the ring. You're fighting in the ring. Your Yetzer Hara, your evil inclination, I try to find a spooky face, has one up on you if you're not in a good space. Your chances to fight and win are weakened. In other words, not all choices are created equal. Not every single one of us has the same free choice at different levels. Some of us are addicted by nature to certain things. Some of us have harder time on impulse control. And each and every one of us has to work on our character. And sometimes it is just grow up. And that's fine. But sometimes it's more than that. And I believe strongly that an honest conversation about mental health is giving the people and all of us the honest truth and the courage to see where we are lagging in our ability to just show up and do whatever we can to show up. Because until you do that, your free choice is not free. It's bogged down. It's being weighed down by something that is stronger than you until you take control over it, until you acknowledge it, as we'll talk about throughout this shir. It is about getting yourself to a place of optimal health so that your power of choice is back. That's what, for me, mental health tonight's talk is about, and what mental health awareness is about, to give us back the power of choice, to make the choice fair. That you're standing over there and your foot, just using the analogy of the person standing right in front on the PowerPoint, you're standing stable and you see the green and you see the red, and you know, and you could see things objectively with a clear mind, with courage, with strength, with tenacity, and then make your call. But at least you're making the call standing up. The Maggid of Mezrich, the holy Maggid of Mezrich, who was a student of the Baal Shem Tov, he taught a very powerful statement. This wasn't said about mental health, it was said about physical health, but how much more so? He said it originally in Yiddish. A kleiner loch in guf is a größer loch in der Neshama. A small hole in the body is a big hole in the soul. In other words, if your body, you have an ingrown toenail, you're going to struggle with your spirituality that day. As much as spiritual you want to be, it's not as easy davening and getting in the zone when you have an ingrown toenail or you have a headache as when you're healthy. Obviously, there are people of incredible character who still keep up their Yiddishkeit and their faith during times of challenge, but it's not easy. And what he says is the reason a person has to take care of their health is because a small hole in the body will be a big hole in your Neshama. It will have a huge effect on your worship of Hashem, on your soul, on your character. How much more so mental illness? A small hole in our mental health is a big hole in our whole character. You know, sometimes a person will have anxiety, the most common mental illness. And therefore, because they're anxious, they'll never give themselves the ability to give a speech, to invite guests to their house, to go date. Now, how many things in their life are being held up from that anxiety? And the person often is not acknowledging its anxiety. No, all the boys are shallow out there, all the girls are kuggles, all this, etc. People will use the various expressions, various excuses, but ultimately, what's at the core? You're anxious. And that anxiety is not only playing out in one area of life, it's playing out in many areas of your life, holding back your future. And that hole in your health, in your mental health, is literally a big hole in your soul because you are not playing your part in this world nearly at capacity. You're not even on the playing field often. So now what? What am I saying? Are you defined by your struggle? If you have mental health, does that mean that now I have to walk around with a mental health issues? I have to walk around feeling that's me? No, not at all. But only when you acknowledge, only when a person is willing to own up and say, I have a struggle. I might have anxiety, I might have depression, I might be bipolar, I might be OCD, I might be ADHD, whatever it is. Only when a person is willing to look in the mirror and say it, can they then become the rider, not the horse. You see, very often, the horse looks so much more powerful than the person who potentially could be sitting there. But the rider, even though they're not necessarily stronger physically than the horse, they're smarter than the horse. And they know how to work with the horse, and they know how to get the horse to take them where they need to go. In life, sometimes we have a big horse under us. We walk around with a huge package. We walk around with a real darkness, real depression, suicidal tendencies, etc., etc. But the moment I acknowledge it and I'm willing to be honest and work on it, then I become the rider and I navigate that monster and make sure that it only helps me become a better person and doesn't break me. Doesn't mean I'll always be in control, but I'll always be the one navigating and the person who could step out and sit there saying, okay, this is my struggle, but it's my horse. It's not me. It's not my owner. I'm not the horse and it's not the rider. Your illness, whether mental or physical, is not your rider. It's your horse. It could be a big horse. It could be a huge package on your back, but still you can walk as long as you believe that you can. Let me explain this in the perspective of Jewish mysticism. Back to the book Tanya. Interesting, I never saw the book Tanya as a manual for mental health, but only recently, as I've become much more aware of mental health, people within myself, within the people around me, have I started to see things with a bit of a fresh perspective. Tanya tells us, and this by now is accepted Jewish philosophy by pretty much almost everybody, each and every one of us has not only two voices, a good voice and a bad voice, but two personalities within us. We have the animal, our animalistic self. The animal, it's not necessarily a bad animal, it could be a sheep, but needs to sleep, eat, go to the toilet, cohabit, has feelings, but very much base, the lowest base of humanity, even if they're a kind animal, but still, no greatness yet. And then there's the godly soul, the soul of Hashem within you, the beautiful, the angelic, the divine, the sublime. And each and every one of us struggles and fights the challenge between these two powerful entities who want to dominate our body. The animal who wants us to use ourselves, use our body for animalistic pursuits, and the godly soul who wants us to use our body for godly pursuits. Eat for the sake of God, for the sake of health, so that you could serve God, etc. Procreate, all the things to do it with the right intention, the right mindfulness, etc. The animal that we have sometimes could be a very dysfunctional animal, whether through nature or nurture. Some of us are just born that way, and some of us were born healthy, and then life circumstances pushed us that way. And we could be a very dysfunctional animal with huge issues. But there's always a part of us, the other part, the godly soul, that never gets affected by that. The godly soul has no mental illness. The godly soul has no physical illness. The godly soul has no illness or weakness, period. And that point is important to remember, not because suddenly you become, oh my gosh, you become divine and your issues go away. But each and every one of us, no matter what we're struggling with, there's a part inside us, inside our brain, inside our heart, that is pure and beautiful. And that is what defines us. That's the you. That is the real you. Which one's the real you? You decide. But if we are going to determine ourselves, if we define ourselves by our animal, then we are putting ourselves low. Some of us are born with very sweet animals. Some people are born with very sweet personalities. They think that it's thanks to, that they were raised well. No, some people are born like sheep. Even the Kabbalah talks about some people have the soul, the animal soul of a cow. Some people have a sheep, fox, whatever, each different personality, different animals. In other words, each one of us comes with our nature. Some of us are dysfunctional natures or nurtures. But there's a part of us that's beautiful, and that part never gets hurt. And that part can overcome and be the rider to the horse, which is the animal. Make your neshama the rider. Make your soul, make your beautiful self, make your wholesome self the rider of your life. Doesn't mean that you'll never fall asleep on the wheel. It doesn't mean that there's suddenly everything becomes hunky-dory, no. But it means that I am in control. There's a part of me that's bigger than that. I am not my illness. Recently, I was counseling somebody who struggles with severe mental illness and slowly but surely started defining themselves by this mental illness. I am schizophrenic, bipolar, whatever. No. You have schizophrenia. You have bipolar. You have depression. You're not that. That is your battle. That might also be your way to greatness. Sometimes the illness itself will make you deeper and more beautiful. But that is not you. That is a vehicle through which you'll play your mission. For some reason, God decided that your purpose in this world will be a different kind of battle than your parent or that your sibling or than other people you know. Your battle is unique, fair, but it's not you. It's a battle. It's a challenge. It's a horse that has to be tamed, domesticated. But ultimately, it's not you. The moment a person defines themselves by their weakness, they're lost. What we call today identity politics. What's identity politics? It's not so common here, but it's unfortunately getting common even here locally. That I'm defined by something in my identity. So I'm white, I'm black, I'm gay, I'm straight, I'm man, I'm woman, I'm liberal, I'm conservative. That becomes my identity. And that's me. And there's this whole dynamic in which the more of a victim you are, it's called intersectionality. The more of a victim you are, the more justified you are to talk. So for example, if you're a woman who's gay, who's colored, et cetera, that you have much more justification than a straight white male. Now again, irrelevant, yes, there's certain things that shouldn't be said by certain people. I always say, as a man, I don't talk about the role of woman in Judaism. I let the woman do it because it's condescending for me to start telling a woman what the role is. Fair enough, I agree, there's room to talk. However, when we start getting defined by the differences in our personality, that's strange. In other words, when somebody gets defined, I'm gay. No, you happen to have a certain sexual tendency. That's fine, not fine, whatever. But that's not you. That is a part of you. That is the way, one part, the way you express yourself. It's not you. My problem is not that you are gay. My problem is the way that you define yourself. That's what I am. No, you're not. You're so much more than that. It's one part of you. Even the fact that I'm a man, that's one part of me. First and foremost, I'm a human. I'm a Jew. When people walk around, start saying, hi, I'm this and I'm an alcoholic. I get it, and I get that there's space for it, but not I'm an alcoholic. I struggle with alcoholism, but I am not an alcoholic. No. No matter what my alcohol problem is, I don't become an alcoholic. My pure self, my soul is never an alcoholic. I struggle with alcoholism, but my identity is not the alcoholism. My identity is not the addiction. My identity is not my overdosing. You are not the sum total of your weaknesses and struggles. Those are things that have to be overcome. Those are battles that each and every one of us battle, but that is not you. Because the moment I define myself by these things, then I have no chance against them. I am the problem. If I am the problem, how can I be the solution? If I am the issue, then how can I solve my issue? I'm the issue. It's not I made a mistake. I'm a mistake. Your essence. You and I ultimately have to look at ourselves and only judge ourselves as human beings by one thing. What am I? My essence. And what is my essence? I'm created in the image of the Creator. My essence is that I am beautiful, deserving of love and kindness and generosity. My essence is not contaminated by the nature and nurture of my personality. It is pure and beautiful. And sometimes it's covered over with dust, and sometimes it's under a mountain of sand. But it is there. And that part of me is perfect. And if somebody could come to me with love and help me uncover that essence, they'll see in me, AKA whoever this person is, how beautiful I really am. We are our essence. But there's one thing that we are judged for in life, not judged by other people, by Hashem. Is our character. So you are your essence, and you're responsible for your character. You're not responsible to win every battle, but you are responsible to at least have a will to develop character. One of my favorite stories, I've shared them many times, is 67. The paratroopers conquered Jerusalem, and a soldier is standing at the Kotel for the first time during the war. And he's standing there sobbing. And his friend turns to him and says, Tzachi, whatever his name was, Lama ta boche? Why are you crying? You're not religious. He says, Ani boche al zeh shani lo boche. I'm crying that I'm not crying. In other words, everyone else is getting so emotional, and this is meaning nothing to me, then something's wrong with me. If every other person over here is sobbing their eyes out, then something's wrong that I'm not feeling it. I'm crying that I'm not crying. I have to just want to develop. And the moment I want to develop my character, it's not enough, but I've shown up. That's all Hashem asks us. He doesn't ask us to be perfect. He doesn't ask us to master our illness and suddenly have never struggle again. But he wants us to work on our character, to want to work on our character, to show up. We are only accountable for our choices and our character. And might I add, and this is where I'm going to be a bit blunt, for our choice to not do what is needed to do to get back free choice. What do I mean? In a moment, I want to discuss the stigma and the fact that some people will not acknowledge their mental illness. For that, we're accountable. Obviously, if we're able to, if we don't have the capacity to acknowledge it. But if we can acknowledge it, but the only reason we're not acknowledging it is because of a character weakness, then we have a problem. We have a real problem. And this is my most important message of the night. What is demanded of each and every one of us is absolute honesty. No baloney. I was going to use a much more drastic term, but I am a rabbi. But try to imagine what I was going to say. But basically, no baloney. We can't fool ourselves. There's a famous Hasidic story that happened with Rabbi Shalom Dovber of Lubavitch, who was the fifth Chabad Rebbe, passed away 100 years ago exactly. And his son, he had one child, only one son, Yosef Yitzchak, who became Bar Mitzvah. And when his son came in for the Bar Mitzvah, he said, here are the 3 rules of becoming an adult. Don't fool yourself. Don't fool others. And don't let others fool you. And do it all without trying to impress anybody. In other words, he turns to his son and says, I know you're becoming a barmy boy, and you're feeling such a man. You know what it means to be an adult? Most important, don't fool yourself. Don't fool others, and don't let others fool you. But do it all, not to be, dafka, not to impress anybody, with character. Rabbi Shalom Dovber's father, his name was Rabbi Shmuel, said a similar statement, but a little more harsh. He says, you cannot fool God. Ultimately, you cannot fool others either. The only one you can fool is yourself. And to fool a fool is no great achievement. The only one you can fool is yourself. And to fool a fool is no great achievement. Who are you fooling? Yourself? So let me say this straight out. If people close to you are telling you that you need therapy, or maybe even medication, and it's not just one person who's being mean, but people who care about you, more than one person is telling you, you have a problem, and you push them off, telling them that they are the problem, or I'm fine, you're not brave. You're a jerk. Forgive the French. I had to say that because I had, how many people are holding back on doing the right thing because of silly ideas that are so ancient, that are so yesteryear, but are holding them back from having a better life. Don't like jerk? Fine. How about fearful? You're a fearful person. Yes, for some people, all they need to do is exercise. Other people need to do journaling. But our goal of our discussion is about being honest enough to get ourselves to the optimal place to battle the battle of life and not sell ourselves baloney. How many anxious, depressed, bipolar people would be amazing dads, moms, and leaders if they only acknowledged they had an issue? I can think of dozens, if not hundreds of people who I know personally, whose parenting, whose marriages, whose quality of life would jump 5,000 steps in 1 minute, not because they had a powerful Rosh Hashanah, not because God did a miracle, because they sat down across a good therapist, or because they went on the medication that God created just for them. Saying that medication is a new thing is like saying, I don't want to use a CAT scan because my grandparents didn't use one. Are you kidding me? Yes, maybe 200 years ago when somebody struggled with mental illness, they were just called the Meshuggah of the town. And maybe that's where the stigma comes from. But we live in a time of more tools to deal with mental illness than ever before in history. And yes, you might say there's more mental illness than ever before in history, but that's no way of knowing. The first fact I know for a fact, because most of this medication is modern therapy, a lot of the ideas are modern in the last 100 years. Were there many people mentally ill 100 years ago? It's an irrelevant question. Are there more because there's more people, or is it modern life? I don't know. But here's what I do know, that there are tools, not all of them are perfect, some of them are long, some of them are hard, Some of them demand 10 years of therapy or 1 year of therapy. Some of them demands high doses of medications that have bad side effects. But how determined am I, and how determined are you to show up and play the life the best way possible without feeling shame? There's nothing wrong with being imperfect. That is what life is. Therapy isn't weakness. Medication isn't weakness. What about the stigma? What will the Joneses say? I'll tell you a story. About 20 years ago, I spent a summer in Lugano, Switzerland. There was a Jewish community. I don't believe it exists anymore. If there is, it's very small. But at the time, it was a beautiful community that was from before the Holocaust. Switzerland managed to avoid the whole Holocaust. So these were people living there for a long time, and they were real German Jews, Yekes, real Yekes. And we spent the summer there. It was a beautiful summer, beautiful town. It was like a beautiful memory of my life. But I remember a certain episode that happened. I noticed a certain person from the community didn't show up to shul for a few days. So I walked over to someone else in the community. I said, "What's going on?" He said, "Shh, we don't talk about it." I said, "What don't you talk about?" He says, "In this community, if you're sick, you don't tell people." Why? It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing to have a fever. Shh. In other words, there are some people, believe it or not, and I'll be honest, it's not only in Lugano, I know it's in my own life, in the community and friends. It's embarrassing. I'm not saying you have to walk around and sit there saying, "I have a fever. I have a headache." No one's saying you don't have to go on Facebook and post it. But when you get shame out of it, oh my gosh, nobody should know. So they'll show up to show till the last minute where they literally can't stand just to prove a point. What are you proving? What are you proving? Go home, sleep well for 2-3 days, get your health back, stop being so macho and deal with it. That's physical health. And the same thing with mental health. As the Rabbi said, and I quoted him earlier, if you have an issue, go to a doctor, go to a therapist, take the issue, go home, maybe give yourself a bit of a holiday, get your senses back, and go back to life. Bravery does not mean not acknowledging the challenges. That's not bravery, it's weakness. Think about how many things in life there are stigmas, and that were till recently. Puberty, parents didn't talk about to their kids what happens at puberty, right? Disability, if you had a child who had a disability, we didn't speak about it, the kid didn't exist. Mental health, also the kid didn't exist. I remember reading the biography of JFK. He had a sister who was mentally ill, and the father who always wanted to, the Kennedys, they were this family in America, he wanted to portray a perfect family. She just didn't exist. She was locked up at home and nobody knew she existed. And truth is, it wasn't only an anti-Semite that Kennedy who did it, many people did it. Say Kennedy's father was an anti-Semite. Et cetera, et cetera. Think I could go sit there going on and on and on and on and on. Stigmas. But what are stigmas? They're made up stories we tell ourselves. And as a society, we start believing them, that there's something embarrassing becoming an adult and your body changing. There's something embarrassing of having something in your brain that's not working 100% okay, that needs help from the outside. If you aren't perfect, then what are you? You're human. You're human. Nothing more, nothing less. We have to be comfortable to acknowledge our issues. Again, it doesn't mean I have to sit there going and right now starting to spill all my challenges. No, this is not confession, and you're not a priest, and it's not Sunday, it's Tuesday. But it does mean that at least for the things that matter, if it's only to the therapist, if it's only to the psychiatrist, if it's only to the trainer, whatever it is, I have to be honest with myself. At some stage, I have to sit there saying, you know what? I have an issue. I struggle in that area. And it's not okay to just say, that's me. There are certain struggles that it's okay to say, that's me. I was born with my father always used to say he was born with two left hands. Born with two left hands. I'm not exactly good with my hands. Fine. I have to learn the basics. I should learn how to change a globe. I did, thank God. Learn how to, fix the basics of my car. But ultimately, I'll never be successful, and that's fine. Ultimately, I'm not interfering in anybody's life that way. But if I have an anger problem, and I show up and I tell my wife, you know what? It's just me. What does that even mean? It's just you. What about you? And it's not okay to say it's you, because ultimately people are suffering. Your anger is setting a tone in the house. Your anger is getting people agitated. Your anger is traumatizing your kids. That's not okay. It's not. The problem is not that you're angry. The problem is you're not acknowledging it. Not to yourself, not to your children. Even if you could walk over to your child and say, you know what, I have an anger problem, but I promise you I'm going to work on it. I'm sorry that I blew up with you. I'm sorry that daddy did that or that mommy did it. I apologize. That wasn't okay. But I will deal with it, and I won't be the same person in a month's time. I will work on it. Our children will forgive us. Our spouse will forgive us. We're human, but be accountable. I'm just a stressed out person. Why? You don't think a little therapy will help you with that? I just don't talk to my family. I'm not going to spill all my beans, but I've said it before. I've gone to therapy. I still go to therapy at times. I don't see it as anything embarrassing. And I know that there were certain things I thought about myself, the way I interact with certain family members. It's just the way I am. But amazingly, after a few months of therapy and dealing with stuff, my relationship changed with them. Fundamentally. I became a different person. So I could have sit there saying for the rest of my life, you know what? I don't talk to my sibling. I don't talk to my parent. I don't talk to my this. It's just my issue. No, it's not okay. Deal with it. You might never get perfect, but you can get better. I want to give you one example of how even Jewish halakha has come a long way these days in acknowledging mental illness, how real it is. It says, this is Aruch HaShulchan, only author in the 19th century, who says, in regards to suicide, once upon a time, the halakha was that a person cannot get buried in a regular cemetery, cannot sit shiva. Only one who kills himself while being of clear and sound mind, free of internal or external coercion, is considered to have committed suicide, because that was committed. If, however, it's possible that there is another factor at play, such as extremes of fear, pain, distress, or mental illness, then it's almost as though the person were coerced into suicide. And it's not considered a suicide of clear and sound mind. It doesn't mean that misery is a valid excuse for suicide, only that post facto, we do not treat the deceased as a suicide. You hear what he's saying? No one really dies by suicide. They die by depression. They die by distress. They die by extreme fear. No one commits suicide. To commit suicide, you have to be of sound mind. My point is that even halakha acknowledges that these battles are real and that people are struggling with real darkness, including many of you. And, just by the mere fact of statistics, 1 out of 4 people struggles with mental illness. That means if we have 50 plus people on this year, over 10 of you, if not more, because I'd imagine in the Jewish population it's bigger, not because we're neurotic, but because we have a lot of trauma in our past. And although we were brave and we came out of the Holocaust and we rebuilt Israel, blah, 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 it's a lot of trauma. And trauma gets passed in generations. So I would say in the Jewish community, it's much higher than 1 in 4, if not 1 in 2. Are you going to acknowledge it? Not to me. It doesn't even have to be to your spouse, to yourself, to your therapist. That's my question. That's my message to each and every one of you today. My message to each and every one of you, and I'm flattered by the size of this group and the fact that you stayed through. My message to you is very simple. Mental illness is real. Whether it's you, your spouse, or your child, there's a very high chance somebody in your immediate surroundings is struggling. Let's get rid of the stigma. Let's get rid of the shame. Let's get rid of the seeing ourselves as less than because we struggle. We are not less than. We are human. And just like there is a medicine for a headache, there's a medicine for illness of the mind. Let's acknowledge it. Thank God we live in 2020 when there are solutions to many of the issues. Not perfect solutions, but good solutions. Could you imagine having to deal with this 200 years ago? If there's ever a time to struggle with mental illness, it's today, because there's so many tools. But there's only one tool that doesn't exist outside yourself. And that is the honesty and the integrity to say, I have a problem. And that's one thing that the Alcoholic Anonymous, AA, and all the A's Anonymous have gotten so right. Because the first thing you have to acknowledge and say is, I have a problem. Friends, our community, we have a problem. We're not acknowledging mental illness, not nearly the way it should be. It's still a stigma. There's still a lot of people who are not dealing with it and bettering their marriages and their parenting and their friendships because of false notions. And if there's anything I could say tonight to make a difference in one person's life, if there's one person here tonight who maybe will go to a therapist once, or will maybe make an appointment to a psychiatrist, a social worker, or even start training their body because that's enough for them, then not only was this all worth it, but that would be the greatest gift. God bless you. Thank you so much.